Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss any more shocking and captivating stories. Enjoy watching. Ethan had always been a man of simple pleasures. A quiet job as an IT consultant, a small but cozy house on the outskirts of Seattle, and a life filled with routine. But there was one thing that kept him going, one thing that made him feel complete. His wife, Claire. She was everything he had ever wanted in a partner, beautiful, intelligent, and kind. They'd met in college, and after a whirlwind romance, they married. It had been 5 years since that day, and everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. It started small. At first, Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on it. Claire, who had once been the loving, affectionate woman he married, was becoming distant. She'd come home late from work more often, her eyes glazed over, and the warmth that used to greet him at the door had begun to fade. Ethan tried to shrug it off. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe work was demanding more of her. After all, she had recently been promoted to a managerial position at her marketing firm. But even as he told himself that, a small voice in his head began to whisper that something wasn't right. The first real sign came a few weeks ago, when Claire forgot their anniversary. It wasn't like her. She was always meticulous with dates, always thoughtful. When Ethan confronted her about it, she apologized, saying she'd had a lot on her plate. He wanted to believe her, but something in her eyes, the way she avoided his gaze, the tightness in her voice, told him otherwise. It wasn't just the anniversary. There were the strange moments when Claire would leave her phone face down on the kitchen counter, or when she'd immediately lock it if Ethan walked into the room. At first, he told himself he was being paranoid, but then the nagging feeling grew stronger. He started checking her social media accounts, noticing her late-night texts, the ones she quickly closed when he entered the room. But they were just harmless chats, right? Nothing more than friends catching up. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the unease that had settled in his chest. He began to observe Claire more closely. Her body language was off. She no longer curled up next to him on the couch like she used to. She no longer kissed him goodnight, and their conversations had become sparse and shallow. Everything felt off, like a distant memory of what they once had. One evening, after Claire had gone out with some work colleagues, Ethan was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. His mind was racing. He hadn't planned to snoop, but there was a part of him that couldn't let go of the suspicion. It was irrational, he told himself, but it was a feeling that had consumed him, and now it felt like the only thing that made sense. Claire's purse was sitting on the chair by the door, and the thought crossed Ethan's mind, what if? He wasn't proud of it, but he reached inside. The first thing his hand brushed against was her phone. It felt like a rock in his stomach. Hesitantly, he picked it up. The screen was locked, but it was a simple pattern, one she had used for years. He typed in the numbers, the familiar combination that had been so easy to remember. The phone clicked open. He was in. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the screen. There were no alarming notifications, no obvious signs of anything suspicious, but then he saw it, an app, one he hadn't seen before, a messaging app. It had an icon that was unrecognizable, and it seemed to be a private chat service, one where messages could disappear. Ethan's blood ran cold. He had never heard of it. What was the full name? But it was clear that it was someone she knew well. The exchange was flirty, playful, even suggestive. Claire had always been cautious about her private life, but here she was, pouring out affection and personal thoughts to someone he didn't even know. She had mentioned him before in passing, but it was always casual, as if he were just another colleague. Ethan's hands trembled as he read more. The conversation quickly escalated, and his stomach twisted with each word. There was talk of secret meetups, plans to finally have some fun, and an unmistakable flirtation. Claire had always been the picture of commitment, so seeing this felt like a punch to the gut. The worst part, she had made it clear in the chat that she was unhappy in her marriage. She joked about how Ethan was too boring, and how she needed someone who understood her needs better. Ethan felt like the world was slipping from beneath his feet. His mind raced. He wanted to confront her, to scream at her, but he was paralyzed. The reality of the situation was too much to process. How could Claire do this to him? How could the woman he trusted above all else betray him like this? The phone slipped from his hand, crashing onto the coffee table with a dull thud. He sat there for what felt like hours, his thoughts spinning in a haze. How had it all come to this? How had the woman he loved become someone he no longer recognized? Just then, he heard the sound of the front door opening. Claire was home. She walked into the living room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Ethan's gaze was fixed on her, his heart hammering in his chest. She looked at him, but there was something different in her eyes. For a moment the world seemed to stand still. Then, with a casual smile, she asked, "Hey, what are you doing up so late?" Ethan's blood boiled. He wanted to yell, to throw her phone in her face and demand answers, but instead he forced a smile. He couldn't let her know he'd discovered the truth. Not yet. Not until he was ready. He stood up, walking slowly toward her, his mind still reeling. But his expression was calm, too calm. He kissed her cheek, just like any other night, even as his mind screamed at him to do something, anything to confront her. "I was just thinking," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "Thinking about us." Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Ethan turned and walked into the kitchen, his mind already planning the next step. He had to know more, he had to find the truth, and he would. But for now, he had to play the part of the loving husband. He couldn't let her know he was onto her. Yet, the next few days felt like a blur to Ethan. His mind was consumed with the knowledge he had uncovered. Yet he couldn't bring himself to confront Claire. She had become even more distant since that night. She would come home late, not even bothering to explain where she had been. She would spend more time in her office, always with the door closed, while Ethan tried to fill the silence by doing chores, watching TV, pretending like everything was fine. But nothing was fine. The phone incident had shaken him deeply. He couldn't stop thinking about Claire's messages with that mysterious D. Who was he? How long had this been going on? But Ethan wasn't ready to confront her yet. No, he needed more. He needed undeniable proof, something concrete that would leave no room for doubt. He had to be certain before he took the final step. Then the opportunity came. It was a Saturday morning, and Claire had left early for a work brunch with some of her colleagues. Ethan knew it was just a cover. He had seen the way she acted when she left the house, always hurried, always a little too eager to get out the door. It was the same every weekend now. So Ethan decided to do something he had been putting off, search her things once again. He started with her office. Claire had a small desk in the guest room that she used for work, and Ethan had always respected her privacy there. But now it felt like he had nothing left to lose. He sat at her desk, going through papers, trying to keep his heart rate steady. There was nothing too unusual, just bills, work emails, and a few files on her latest project. But then something caught his eye. Beneath a stack of magazines, there was an old leather bag, one that he didn't recognize. Ethan's curiosity got the better of him, and he opened the bag. At first it looked like a typical purse, some makeup, a wallet, a few receipts. But then, hidden in a side pocket, he found it, a second phone. His breath caught in his throat. He froze, staring at the device. Claire had never mentioned a second phone, and if she had, he would have remembered. He could feel the tension building in his chest as he carefully picked it up. It was a newer model, one with a sleek black screen and no visible cracks. Claire had always been careful with her gadgets, so he had no idea where she'd hidden this one. For a moment, Ethan thought about putting it back. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just for work or something inconsequential. But deep down he knew this phone held the key to the truth. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to see what was inside. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the phone. This time there was no familiar pattern, just a fingerprint scan. Ethan hesitated, but something inside him pushed him forward. He pressed his thumb against the sensor. To his surprise, it unlocked immediately. The phone was open. Ethan's heart pounded as he navigated through the screen. The first thing he noticed were the numerous notifications. There were messages, dozens of them, but they were all from one person, D. His stomach sank. It was the same name from the other phone. He clicked on the messages. His eyes widened as he read them, his hands shaking more with each line. The conversation between Claire and D was even more intimate than what he had seen before. They discussed things Ethan couldn't even fathom, things that made him sick to his stomach. They shared intimate photos, texts that were laced with flirtation. It was the way Claire spoke about him. She had mocked him. She had belittled him to D, calling him a dull, predictable husband, and saying that he didn't understand her at all. The words cut deep, deeper than anything Ethan had ever felt before. His mind reeled as he read more. Claire had been seeing D behind his back for months. The messages were filled with plans to sneak around, to go on secret dates, to meet up when Ethan was working late or away on business trips. There were pictures too, pictures that Ethan never thought he'd see, photos of Claire in places he'd never been, in outfits he didn't recognize. She had been living a double life, and he had been blind to it. The messages became even more revealing. Claire talked about how she had fallen out of love with Ethan and how she couldn't stand his boring routine anymore. She made it clear that she had no intention of leaving him anytime soon, though. She'd claimed she was too comfortable in her marriage to do that, but she was definitely looking for more excitement. Ethan sat back in the chair, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had been lying to him for months. He had given her everything, and this was how she repaid him. As he sat there, his mind raced. How could he confront her now? What could he even say? But one thing was clear: she had crossed a line that he couldn't ignore. He couldn't just pretend like everything was okay anymore. He needed to know the truth, and he would confront her, soon. But as Ethan scrolled through the phone, a sudden realization hit him. There was something else in the messages that caught his attention. A meeting. Claire and Dee had planned to meet that very night. Ethan's jaw clenched as his anger flared. He wasn't going to let her get away with this, not anymore. He took a deep breath, staring at the phone in his hands. He was done being passive. He had all the proof he needed. Now, it was time to end this. It was time to confront Claire once and for all. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze for Ethan. The weight of the discovery sat heavily on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. He kept going over the messages, reading each one with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at him, the crushing realization that Claire had been living a lie for so long. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had shared his life with, was someone entirely different. He checked the time. It was nearly 600 p.m. Claire would be home soon. He couldn't wait any longer. The night she had planned to meet Dee was here. Ethan knew exactly where she was going, and he knew that the time to confront her was now. He had no more patience left for the lies, for the facade they had built over the years. It was time to expose the truth. Ethan stood up, his hands still shaking slightly as he set the second phone down on the kitchen counter. He needed to prepare himself. The confrontation would be inevitable, and he couldn't afford to be weak when it came. His mind flashed to the moments they had shared, the anniversaries, the vacations, the quiet mornings. Had it all been a lie? Had she ever really loved him? There was a knock on the door. Claire. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to come home so early. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His emotions were a whirlwind, but he couldn't let her see how deeply this had affected him. At least, not yet. He opened the door, and Claire stood there, looking stunning as always. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her smile was warm, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was wearing a light summer dress, the same one she had worn on their first date. Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. Was that real? Was any of it real? "Hey, babe," Claire said, her voice light. She gave him a quick hug, pressing her cheek against his. "You're home early, everything okay?" Ethan's stomach churned, but he smiled back at her. "Yeah, just been thinking." His voice was steady, almost too steady. He couldn't let her see how upset he was. Not yet. He needed to confront her with calm precision. Claire pulled away, her eyes scanning him. "You okay?" she asked again, this time with more concern in her voice. Ethan forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine. Just needed some time to think." "Well, you're looking good," she said, her tone lighter now. "So, what do you want to do tonight? Maybe we can catch up, have a nice dinner." No," Ethan interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. He watched as Claire's eyes widened in surprise. She wasn't used to him cutting her off like that. Her smile faltered, and she raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong? You're acting weird." Ethan took a deep breath. It was time. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he walked past her into the living room, the tension building in his chest with each step. Claire followed him, her confusion mounting as she tried to make sense of his behavior. "I know about your second phone, Claire," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. Claire froze in her tracks. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she chuckled softly, trying to deflect the tension. What are you talking about?" Ethan turned to face her, his eyes piercing. "I know about Dee, the messages, the lies." His voice grew louder, his anger starting to seep through the cracks in his calm facade. "I know everything." Claire's face went pale. Her lips parted as if she was about to say something, but no words came out. She took a step back, her hand instinctively going to her pocket, as if trying to protect the phone he had already discovered. Ethan watched her closely, his gaze never leaving her face. The truth had been spilled out into the open, and there was no way to take it back. "How long, Claire?" he asked, his voice tight with pain. "How long have you been seeing him behind my back?" She opened her mouth, her words coming out in a rush. "It's not what you think. Ethan, please, just no." He cut her off again, his anger building. "Don't you dare lie to me. I've seen everything, the photos, the texts, the plans." His voice cracked, his heart breaking all over again. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Sneaking around, acting like everything was normal while you were getting everything you wanted from him. From Dee." Claire's eyes flickered, and for the first time, Ethan saw a crack in her calm exterior. Her face was a mask of guilt, but she quickly tried to cover it up with a forced sigh. Ethan, I never meant for it to get this far. I was just trying to find something for myself. You've been so distant, and I felt like I was suffocating in this relationship. I'm not happy, okay? Ethan's mind exploded with rage, but he held it together. So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to work things out, you decided to cheat on me, to hide everything behind my back, to make a fool of me. Claire stepped closer, reaching out to him, but Ethan stepped back, putting distance between them. Don't touch me, he spat. You've made your choice, Claire. You've chosen him. I don't even know who you are anymore. She looked like she was about to cry, her eyes brimming with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. I couldn't talk to you. You didn't get me. You didn't see me anymore. The pain in Ethan's chest deepened. You didn't give me a chance to see you. You shut me out, and now you've destroyed everything we built. Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say, Ethan. I don't. Ethan's voice was cold, sharp, cutting through the space between them. Don't apologize. I've seen the truth, and you've shown me who you really are. We're done. I'm done. For a moment, there was silence. Ethan stood there, staring at Claire, his heart breaking, his world shattering around him. She was standing there, tearful and pleading, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to care. She had betrayed him. She had broken him. And now he was done. I want a divorce, Ethan said quietly. His voice resolute. It's over, Claire. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a slow unraveling of everything Claire had known. Ethan had packed his things and left the house that night. He didn't want to stay in the place that had once felt like home, where everything he had worked for, everything he had loved, had been shattered. The next few days were filled with meetings with lawyers, phone calls to banks, and hours spent in silence while Claire tried in vain to convince him to reconsider. She had apologized, begged him, and even promised to end things with Dee and work on their marriage. But it was too late. Ethan had seen enough. There was no going back. Claire had destroyed their life together, and now the only thing left for her was to face the consequences. It didn't take long for Ethan to move forward with the divorce. His lawyer was quick, efficient, and clear in the terms they would pursue. Ethan had every right to claim the house, as it was under his name, and Claire's infidelity would be used against her in the settlement. He wasn't interested in revenge, not really, but he wasn't about to let her walk away without facing the consequences of what she had done. Ethan had once trusted Claire completely. He had loved her without reservation. But now, all that was left was a deep, bitter emptiness that filled him. The thought of her lying to him, betraying him with someone else, felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. He knew that the best thing for him was to let go, to walk away and rebuild his life without her. Claire, on the other hand, had been living in a haze of confusion and regret. She was shocked, truly shocked, by how quickly everything had fallen apart. Ethan had always been the stable one in their relationship, the one who took care of things, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. Claire had always thought that she could get away with the affair, that Ethan would never find out, that she could keep living this double life. But the truth had caught up to her in the most brutal way. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, Claire found herself grappling with the reality of the situation. She no longer had the life she had once known. The luxury of their house, the comfortable lifestyle, the respect she had commanded at work, all of it was slipping away. Ethan had moved out, and she was left alone in the house that once felt like a sanctuary, but now felt cold and empty. The money they had earned together was no longer something she could freely spend, and the house, her home, was no longer hers. Ethan had made sure that the divorce settlement was fair but firm. He had taken the house, and Claire was left with very little. She had lost the financial stability she had once relied on, the life of luxury that came with being married to Ethan. The legal battle dragged on, and her lawyer advised her to accept the terms that Ethan had laid out, but Claire stubbornly refused. She believed she was entitled to more, convinced that she had sacrificed so much for their marriage, even though she had been the one who had betrayed him. But it wasn't just the money that Claire lost. The emotional cost was far greater. Her colleagues, the friends she had made during their marriage, began to distance themselves from her. Word spread about the affair, about the lies she had told, about the man she had hurt. People who had once admired her began to look at her with judgment, as if she were no longer worthy of the respect she had once commanded. The support system she thought she could count on crumbled. Ethan's friends had already cut ties with her, and now, even her own social circle was beginning to unravel. The shame of what she had done was slowly consuming her. Claire had always been the center of attention at social gatherings, always the one to throw extravagant parties and be the life of the room. But now, she found herself alone. The emptiness she had felt when Ethan left the house began to creep in, gnawing at her every waking moment. No one was calling her anymore. No one was asking her out to dinner. The life she had built on lies was disintegrating before her eyes. And then there was D. When Claire reached out to him hoping for solace, she received nothing in return. His texts became fewer and fewer, and soon he stopped responding altogether. Claire was left wondering if he had ever truly cared for her, or if she had just been another conquest, another fling to fill the void in his life. The worst part, she never got to ask him. He had cut her off just as easily as he had come into her life. In a moment of desperation, Claire tried to salvage whatever she could. She reached out to Ethan one last time, asking if there was any chance of reconciliation. But the response she received was clear, and it was final. "I'm done, Claire. You had your chance. I'm moving on." That was it. The final nail in the coffin of their marriage. Claire's world had crumbled around her, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of a life she had destroyed. Her friends had turned their backs on her, her career had started to falter, and the man she had loved was no longer there. All that remained was the cold, empty house, and the realization that she had sacrificed everything for nothing. She had thought she was entitled to more, that she deserved better, but in the end, she had lost it all. Ethan, on the other hand, was moving forward. He had found a small apartment, nothing extravagant, but enough for him to start fresh. He focused on his work, began meeting new people, and found peace in the silence that came from no longer being tethered to Claire's lies. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, he felt stronger. He had lost his trust in love, but he had gained something far more valuable, his own sense of self-worth. Claire had ruined their marriage, but in doing so, she had unknowingly given Ethan the freedom to rebuild his life on his terms. As for Claire, she learned the hard way that every action has a consequence. The life she had taken for granted was gone, and now, she had to face the reality that she was responsible for it. The price of her choices was more than she had ever imagined, and it was a price she would never stop paying.